The Catalina Foothills sit quiet at 1:47 in the morning. The kind of quiet you only find at the edge of the Sonoran Desert, where the wind carries no traffic, no voices, only the soft hum of distant air conditioning and the occasional rustle of dry brush. Inside a $1 million home set back from the road, an 84-year-old woman is asleep. Her hearing aids rest on the nightstand. Her phone lies beside them, dark and silent. She cannot hear the desert wind. She cannot hear the soft footsteps approaching her front door. And she cannot hear the doorbell camera quietly capturing the figure now standing on her porch. A balaclava, double gloves, a posture so still, so deliberate that you can tell, even on grainy footage, this is not someone improvising. This is someone who has rehearsed this moment. Someone who knows exactly how long the silence will last before anyone notices she is gone. By the time the sun comes up over Tucson, Nancy Guthrie will have vanished from the home she has lived in for decades. Her medication will sit untouched on the counter. Her pacemaker will have already disconnected from the phone she left behind. And the next person to walk through her front door will pause for 7 full minutes before picking up the phone to dial 911. 7 minutes. 14 hours of silence before that. One quiet conversation between a mother and her daughter that, if the reporting is correct, may explain why every one of these details ended up arranged in exactly this order. This is the story of what happens when you follow the money. Before we walk you any deeper into this case, if you find yourself drawn to stories like Nancy's, the ones where the smallest details carry the heaviest weight, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. We post disturbing crime narrations like this one every single week, and we follow ongoing cases like the Guthrie investigation for as long as it takes for the truth to surface. Tap subscribe. Turn on the notification bell. Stay with us. There is a great deal more coming in this story than you realize. To understand what was taken from this family, you first have to understand what was there before. Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old. She had lived in the Catalina Foothills for decades, in a home valued at roughly $1 million, in one of the most desirable neighborhoods Tucson has to offer. The foothills themselves are a particular kind of place, wide-set houses tucked into the dry slopes above the city, long driveways, saguaros standing guard like silent neighbors, the kind of community where you can go an entire evening without hearing a single car pass your house. Nancy was a woman of routine. Sunday morning church on a live stream, dinners with family who lived only a few miles away. A quiet life, well-built, anchored in the kind of stillness that most people spend a lifetime trying to earn. Her daughter Annie lived approximately 4 miles away, in a home estimated at around $650,000. Annie's husband, Tommaso Sion, lived there with her. The gap between the two homes, a roughly $350,000 difference in value, would have meant nothing on any other day in any other family. Parents often have more than their children. That is the natural order of things. But this case has forced that gap into a different light, because the most common motive in cases where an elderly person is harmed by someone within their own circle is not rage. It is not revenge. It is not passion. It is access. Access to assets that become available the moment the owner is no longer there to protect them. And what we are about to walk you through is a documented financial trail that runs directly through the center of this investigation. But before we get there, we need to talk about what was already missing from Nancy's life long before anyone showed up at her door. Here is the part of this story that almost nobody talks about, and it deserves your full attention, because it matters more than people realize. Nancy Guthrie was, by every practical definition, alone. She lived in that $1 million home without an overnight caretaker, without an alarm system, without a medical alert pendant on her wrist or around her neck. Her camera system, the one you would expect a home like this to have actively recording at all hours, was not actively recording. Her dog had passed away some time before, and a new one had never been brought into the home, removing the one early warning system most elderly homeowners rely on without ever realizing they rely on it. Every night, Nancy removed her hearing aids before bed. The moment those came out, she became, in her own home, completely deaf to the world around her. A door could open. A footstep could land in the hallway. A voice could speak from 3 feet away. She would not hear it. And on her counter sat medication that the Pima County Sheriff later confirmed could be fatal to Skip. Medication she needed to take at 10 in the evening. Medication that no one was there to remind her about, monitor, or notice if she missed. Now here is the detail that does not sit right with anyone who has spent a moment thinking about this case carefully. Every one of those missing safeguards cost almost nothing to put in place. A camera subscription runs about $15 a month. A medical alert pendant costs less than $1 a day. An overnight home health aide in the Tucson area runs a few $100s a week. These are not luxuries. They are not the elite protections of the ultra-wealthy. These are the basic routine precautions that families with aging parents put in place as a matter of course. A single phone call, a credit card. That was the entire barrier between an 84-year-old woman being reasonably protected and being completely, totally exposed. The Guthrie family had the resources. 3 adult children. One of them, Savannah Guthrie, is among the highest-paid broadcast journalists in the country. The combined income across that family is more than sufficient to cover every single one of those safeguards many times over, without anyone feeling the slightest financial impact. And none of it was done. Hold on to that detail, because in a few minutes, we are going to revisit it through a very different lens, and when we do, it is going to look completely different than it does right now. Let us walk through the final hours of Nancy Guthrie's documented life, minute by minute. 5:32 in the evening on January 31st. Nancy requests an Uber from her home. The driver arrives. He picks her up. He takes her 4 miles to her daughter Annie and son-in-law Tommaso's residence for dinner. This ride is fully documented. Timestamps, in-car footage. A cooperative driver who has been fully interviewed by the FBI. Everything about the trip to the dinner is on the record. What happens at the dinner is not publicly known. Conversations between a mother and her daughter, between a mother-in-law and her son-in-law, are private things. Plates of food, lamps in the corner. A normal family evening as far as anyone has been told. But here is where the documentation begins to thin out. The trip home is not on the record in the same way. Nancy did not take an Uber back. Tommaso drove her. He decided when they departed. He chose the route. He determined the moment she reached her front door. His account of what happened at that door, walking her in, watching the garage close behind her, stands completely alone. No camera recorded that arrival. No neighbor witnessed it. No app generated a timestamp. The only version of those final minutes before Nancy was alone in her house comes from a single person. And then comes the part that experienced investigators always circle back to. The silence. From approximately 9:50 in the evening on January 31st until 12:03 in the afternoon on February 1st, 14 hours and 13 minutes passed without a single phone call, text message, or visit from the family who lived 4 miles away and had just spent an entire evening with her. 14 hours. Think about what that means. Nancy was 84. She had a pacemaker. She needed medication at 10 in the evening that could be fatal to skip. She was about to remove her hearing aids and disappear into total auditory silence. She was alone in a house with no working cameras, no alarm, and no medical alert. The people who had just driven her home knew every one of those facts. They had just sat across from her at a dinner table. And from the moment that garage door closed until a friend called the next morning because she had not appeared on a church live stream, there was nothing. No goodnight call, no morning check-in, no 3-second text that simply said, "Home safe?" That kind of small automatic ritual is the rhythm of most families with aging parents. Its absence on this particular night created the exact operational window that whoever took Nancy required. A clean, uninterrupted 14-hour gap. At 1:47 in the morning, the doorbell camera captures the masked figure on the porch. At 2:28 in the morning, Nancy's pacemaker disconnects from the phone she left on the nightstand. She has been moved beyond Bluetooth range. She is no longer in her bedroom. She is no longer in her house, and the world will not learn this for almost 10 more hours. But what investigators discovered next changed everything. Here is the detail that, if it is verified, may change the meaning of every single thing we have just told you. According to a report published by Hidden Times, Annie Guthrie asked her mother for a loan shortly before Nancy disappeared from her home on February 1st. Nancy reportedly said no. We have to stop right here and be precise about what is known. That claim has not been confirmed by law enforcement. It has not been addressed publicly by the Guthrie family. It has not been denied. But it landed in the middle of a case where financial questions surrounding Annie and Tommaso had been quietly accumulating for months. Now, on its own, a daughter asking her mother for money is not extraordinary. It happens in families all the time. A parent saying no to that request is also not extraordinary. Difficult, perhaps. Awkward, perhaps. But not extraordinary. What makes this reported conversation extraordinary is its position in the sequence. Roll it back. May of 2025, 8 months before Nancy disappears, a durable power of attorney is signed. Tommaso names Annie as his agent over financial and property matters. Legal experts who weighed in publicly said it is routine paperwork, the kind of document that gets signed during a mortgage refinance or a property transfer. And maybe that is exactly all it is. But then, sometime before January 31st, Annie reportedly asks Nancy for money. Nancy says no. On January 31st, Nancy has dinner at Annie and Tommaso's house. Tommaso drives her home. On February 1st, Nancy is gone. You can dismiss any single item in that sequence as coincidence, but the sequence itself has a direction, and the direction is financial. If that loan refusal is real, then the last person Nancy had dinner with is the daughter she just turned down. The last person to drive her home is the husband of that daughter. And the 14 hours of silence that followed occurred in the wake of a conversation where a mother had said no to her child. That is not a small detail. That is, potentially, the most important exchange in this entire case. And there is one more piece of the financial puzzle that we have not told you about yet. In recent weeks, photographs surfaced. People at Nancy Guthrie's residence. Annie's Honda CR-V visible at the property. Boxes being carried out of the home. We have to be very clear about the legal reality here. Nancy Guthrie has not been declared dead. No death certificate has been issued. No probate has been initiated. No court has authorized anyone to remove personal property from the home of a woman whose disappearance is still classified as an active criminal investigation. And yet boxes are leaving that house. There has been no confirmation that anyone is planning to move into the residence. But between the boxes leaving the property, the repeated presence of Annie's vehicle, and the fact that Tommaso was reportedly observed moving through the house and garage with visible familiarity on the same day ransom notes surfaced publicly, the public has connected its own dots. The picture those dots form is uncomfortable to look at. If items are being removed from the home of a missing person whose case is still an active federal investigation, that is a matter law enforcement is almost certainly aware of. The fact that it has continued without any public intervention tells you one of two things. Either investigators are watching and documenting rather than stopping it, or there is an explanation that has not been made public. Neither of those possibilities is reassuring. And now let us return to those missing safeguards we mentioned earlier. The cameras, the alarm, the overnight aid, the medical alert. Through the lens of a reported loan refusal, the question of why none of those were ever put in place takes on an entirely different dimension. It is no longer simply an oversight. It becomes a situation that someone under financial pressure may not have seen as a priority worth funding. Or, and this is the harder version of the question, it becomes something that was permitted to continue because a vulnerable, unmonitored, unprotected woman in $1 million home is significantly easier to reach than one surrounded by cameras, alarms, and a caretaker sleeping in the next room. We are not stating that as a conclusion. We are laying out the logic that the financial evidence invites. And it is the same logic experienced investigators apply when they encounter this combination of factors. If you are still with us, this is the moment to subscribe to the channel. We cover disturbing crime cases like Nancy's every single week, with the care and patience these stories deserve, and we follow ongoing investigations closely so you never miss an update. Tap subscribe, turn on the bell, share this video with someone who has been following the Guthrie case. The next part of the story is where the investigation truly begins to crack open. Let us bring you up to date on where the forensic side of this case stands. A CODIS search, the national DNA database used by law enforcement, has already come back negative. That means whoever left biological material inside Nancy Guthrie's home has never been in the criminal justice system. No prior arrests, no prior convictions, a completely clean record. Think about what that eliminates. Career criminals, repeat offenders, anyone with a documented history of violence that put them in the system. The DNA profile investigators are working with belongs to someone living what appears, from the outside, to be a completely ordinary life. Someone whose name would not trigger any flags in any database. Someone who could attend family dinners. Someone who could drive an elderly woman home. Someone who could sign legal documents. Someone who could ask for a loan. The hair sample recovered from inside the home, the one the sheriff's office initially sent to a private lab in Florida rather than the FBI lab at Quantico, is now believed to be undergoing analysis at a level of sophistication that has cracked cases once considered permanently unsolvable. A laboratory in the San Francisco area, the same one referenced in connection with the Rex Heuermann case, has been mentioned in connection with this evidence. That laboratory specializes in forensic genetic genealogy, the technology that builds a family tree from a DNA sample and works backward until it identifies a living person. That process takes time. It is painstaking. It requires patience that the public and the media are not naturally built for, but it has never permanently failed when applied to quality biological evidence. And if the hair recovered from that house contains a root, which determines whether full genomic profiling is possible, then whoever left it in that house is already in a database they'd not even know exists. Meanwhile, Annie's Honda CR-V was seized by law enforcement and held for over 40 days of forensic examination. 40 days is not standard processing time. That is the timeline of a vehicle being examined for specific biological or trace material evidence. And then there is the 911 call. The 911 call that reported Nancy missing has never been made public. Not the recording, not a transcript, not even a summary of what was said or how it began. In Arizona, 911 recordings are public records. Reporters can request them. In the vast majority of high-profile missing persons cases, the recording surfaces within days, sometimes within hours. 3 months into this investigation, nobody has heard what was said when that call was placed. Retired Detective Bob Gilliam, appearing on a public interview program, addressed this directly. He said there is almost certainly investigative information on that recording that law enforcement does not want the public to hear yet. He said not to hold your breath, waiting for it to be released. And then he said something that carries more weight than anything else in his statement. He suggested the recording may not surface until a trial date approaches. A trial. That word is not thrown around casually by retired law enforcement professionals with decades of experience. A trial implies charges. It implies an arrest. It implies that the trajectory of this investigation, despite 3 months of public silence and apparent stagnation, leads to a courtroom. And the 911 call is being preserved as evidence for that proceeding. Now think about what might be on that recording that would justify keeping it sealed for this long. The obvious elements are the caller's voice, the time of the call, the words she chose, but also the less obvious ones. How much detail did the caller volunteer before the dispatcher even asked? Did she describe what she found inside the house? Did she describe the blood on the porch? Did she describe specific details that a person arriving at a scene for the first time would not yet know? And then there was the 7-minute gap. The family arrived at the home at 11:56 in the morning. The 911 call was placed at 12:03 in the afternoon. 7 minutes between walking up to the home of a missing 84-year-old woman and picking up a phone to call for help. What happened in those 7 minutes? Were they searching the house? Calling each other? Discussing what to say before dialing? Touching things they should not have touched? One detail still does not make sense, and it may not until a courtroom finally hears the recording for itself. Sheriff Chris Nanos has not held a substantive press conference in over a month. On May 1st, the 3-month mark of Nancy's disappearance, he appeared in a brief video clip saying he believes someone out there knows what happened and urging that person to call. That is the public posture of a department that is either holding something it cannot yet disclose or managing an investigation at a stage where public statements would create more problems than they solve. NBC News reportedly built a specific protocol at the Today Show for this case. If news about Nancy breaks during a live broadcast, Savannah Guthrie is removed from the set immediately. A different anchor delivers the story on camera. The information is given to Savannah privately and off-air. That protocol was reportedly activated on April 15th. Savannah was pulled mid-broadcast and returned later without explanation. 2 days afterward, she was absent from the show entirely. Networks do not construct that kind of internal procedure for cases they believe are going cold. They build it for cases where they expect a moment, an arrest, a discovery, an identification to hit in real time during a live national broadcast. The existence of that protocol is itself a form of preparation, and preparation signals expectation, Doctor. Matthew Hines, vice chair of the Pima County Board of Supervisors, publicly accused Sheriff Nanos of hindering cooperation with the FBI because of a personal grudge against the Bureau. A sitting elected county official made that accusation in public. It has not been retracted. And then there is Ed Smart, the father of Elizabeth Smart, a man who has lived through exactly this kind of nightmare from the inside. He appeared publicly and chose his words with visible care. He said the Guthrie family has, quote, supposedly been cleared. Supposedly. That is the word you use when you are respecting an official position while leaving the door precisely deliberately, open to the possibility that it is not the final word. Let us stack the financial thread one final time, beginning to end, because when you see it assembled as a single continuous sequence, it becomes very difficult to look away from. May of 2025. A durable power of attorney is signed, giving Annie authority over Tommaso's financial and property affairs. Legal experts call it routine. The timing places it 8 months before the abduction. Sometime before January 31st, Annie reportedly asked Nancy for a loan. The amount is unknown, the reason is unknown. Nancy says no. That refusal, if verified, is the first documented moment of financial tension between a mother and the daughter who would be the last person to see her. January 31st, 5:32 in the evening. Nancy takes a documented Uber to Annie and Tommaso's home for dinner. January 31st, approximately 9:50 in the evening. Tommaso drives Nancy home. The ride is completely undocumented. No third-party camera, no rideshare log, no independent witness. 9:50 in the evening to 12:03 the following afternoon. 14 hours and 13 minutes of total silence. February 1st, 1:47 in the morning. The doorbell camera captures the masked figure on the porch. February 1st, 2:28 in the morning. The pacemaker disconnects from the phone. Nancy has been moved beyond Bluetooth range. February 1st, 12:03 in the afternoon. The 911 call is made. It is currently sealed. A retired detective with decades of experience says it likely contains evidence being preserved for trial. February through March. Annie's Honda CR-V is seized and held for more than 40 days of forensic examination. April. Photographs surface showing people removing items from Nancy's residence. Her vehicle is present at the property. Nancy has not been declared dead. No legal process has authorized the removal of anything from that home. May. Speculation emerges publicly that someone intends to move into Nancy's residence. The question circulates without an answer from the family. That is the thread, and it runs through every phase of this case. Each item in that sequence has an innocent explanation. We have to acknowledge that, clearly and directly. A power of attorney can be entirely routine. A dinner can be just a dinner. A ride home can be a simple act of courtesy. A gap in phone calls can be an oversight. Boxes can be moved for legitimate preservation reasons. Every single piece of this has a version that means nothing on its own. But here is what we have learned from covering cases like this one. When every innocent explanation requires you to ignore the piece that came before it and the piece that comes after it. When accepting each one in isolation requires you to pretend the sequence does not exist. The innocent explanations stop being the most likely ones. They become the ones you have to work hardest to believe. We are not accusing Annie Guthrie of anything. We are not accusing Tommaso Cion of anything. What we are doing is following the evidence. And the evidence has led to a financial trail that begins with a daughter asking her mother for money and ends with boxes leaving $1 million home before the law has declared its owner dead. There are still questions that have not been answered. Who is the masked figure on the porch? Whose hair is being analyzed at a laboratory in California? What is on the 911 recording that retired investigators say will not be released until trial? Why was a vehicle of someone publicly described as cleared held for 40 days? And the most important question of all, the one this entire case may eventually rest upon. Did a quiet conversation between a mother and her daughter end with the word no, and did that no set in motion everything that came afterward? An 84-year-old woman is still missing tonight. The CODIS search came back with nothing. The DNA belongs to someone with a clean record, someone unremarkable, someone living an ordinary life, someone who may have been inside that house before, someone who may have sat at the dinner table she sat at on her last documented evening. The 911 call is sealed. A retired detective says it will not be released until a trial date is set. A trial date, that is where, in his judgment, this is heading. And when it gets there, the conversation that may have started all of this, a mother, a daughter, a request for money, and a single word, may turn out to be the most important exchange in this entire case. If you have any information about the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, contact the Pima County Sheriff's Department at 520-351-4900. You can also contact the FBI directly. The reward remains $1.2 million. Somewhere out there, someone knows what happened that night. Someone knows whose hair landed inside that home. Someone knows what happened in those 7 minutes before the call was placed. Someone knows whether the word no was the spark. And eventually, slowly, painstakingly, the way these cases always do, the truth has a way of arriving. We will be here when it does. If this story stayed with you, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel before you go. We tell stories like Nancy's with patience and care every single week, and we cover disturbing crime narrations and ongoing case updates that you will not find anywhere else. Subscribe, turn on the notification bell, drop a comment so the algorithm knows you were here, and share this video with someone who has been following the case. The next update is already on its way. Thank you for staying with us until the end. Stay safe out there. We will talk to you soon.